Whoa.
Woo! Present. So we can just, Brett has a little bit of a leak right there. We can just put just a little bit of water on it and put it out.
Hello, this is Brett from Survivalcomms, and today on the table we have a few types of a very important tool that's often overlooked, the fire extinguisher. You know, being able to take rapid action to extinguish a fire in its incipient phase before it grows is an important consideration no matter where you are. And correctly selecting, locating, maintaining, and knowing how to properly utilize a fire extinguisher should be a priority for everyone. Equipping your home, shop, vehicle, vessel, or heavy equipment with an extinguisher is not just smart, in certain circumstances it's a requirement. Now, for example, it wouldn't take very long for a malfunctioning Baofeng charger to reach its own ignition temperature and that little small fire to extend to other items in its proximity. And within a few minutes, you could have a room and contents fire. With modern decor, furnishings, etc., it could be seconds. In most cases, however, a properly operating smoke detector will alert you in time for you to equip yourself with an extinguisher and use it to prevent extension and effect extinguishment. Now, hopefully, this creation will foster an interest in this subject matter and allow you to develop a plan that works for you. And all this, in my opinion, is to be taken as food for thought. If you have a plan, then I encourage you to review it and inspect the equipment you will utilize to effect it. And as with all my content, this will be as much information as I can convey into the time we spend together. Let's get started. The types of fires that an extinguisher is intended to extinguish are broken up into different classes as shown here. The letters, shapes, and colors shown here in conjunction with one another will identify what type of fire the extinguisher is intended to be used on. Class A is a green triangle, and this represents ordinary combustibles, wood, paper, plastic, things of that nature. A Class B fire, represented by a red square, is flammable liquids, fuel solvents, lubricants, things of that nature. A Class C fire is a blue circle, and that represents intended use on energized electrical equipment because the agent being employed is non-conductive. It's important to remember that once you remove power or de-energize the equipment that's involved in fire, typically you're dealing with a Class A or Class B type fire. Class D is represented by a yellow star, combustible metal such as lithium, magnesium, and things of that nature. A Class K fire is a fire involving organic greases, fats, and oils seen in cooking. Modern fire extinguisher labeling systems are extremely detailed. Underneath the instructions, which are typically in more than one language, you'll find these pictograms now used to indicate the intended use of the particular fire extinguisher in question. Almost as important as possessing a fire extinguisher is locating that fire extinguisher. Now, a fire extinguisher is an emergency piece of equipment, and therefore it needs to be visible and readily accessible to all occupants or potential users of this equipment in an emergency situation. Now, if you're a commercial user of a fire extinguisher, you're required to possess that. The body that's requiring you to possess this equipment under code or ordinance or whatever have you, you need to check with them and figure out exactly where do you want us to have the fire extinguishers located at and how many do we need, etc., etc. Now, for the individual homeowner, some general guidelines for locating a fire extinguisher are: you don't want to be more than 50 feet travel distance away from a fire extinguisher. Typically, the guidelines for commercial occupancies are between 30 and 75 feet, depending upon the kind of hazard that you have. And you don't want your extinguishers resting on the ground. You want them to be a minimum of 4 inches off of the floor. Your extinguishers don't need to be mounted too high if you're mounting them on the wall. You want to keep the extinguisher less than 5 feet above the floor. Now, as an individual homeowner, if you elect to store your extinguisher under a sink or in a pantry or something like that, you know, you could certainly get something like this. And I don't want these kind of stickers sticking all over my house either. So it's important that everyone in your home know exactly where those fire extinguishers are located. My personal preference for mounting a fire extinguisher is I like to have them at the entrance and exit to the room. So therefore, I have the exit to my back and the fire to my front. The extinguishers we're going to talk about in this video are what are known as stored pressure extinguishers. The term stored pressure, meaning that the entire extinguisher itself is pressurized. We've placed the agent, which in this example here is ABC dry chemical, and we've added or pressurized the extinguisher with an expellant, which in this case here is nitrogen, and it could be something as simple as compressed air. And the state of pressurization of the extinguisher is indicated by the gauge. Almost all stored pressure extinguishers that you're going to come across are going to have the same physical package, meaning that we have our cylinder here, which in this example is constructed of steel. We have a valve assembly on top with 2 levers. The valve has a safety pin in it, and it's retained by a safety tag to prevent the pin from coming out and inadvertent discharge of the extinguisher and expelling its contents. And then we have a dispensing hose, and we have a nozzle. Let's look at a couple of common pickup tube and yoke assemblies for stored pressure fire extinguishers. This one is for a liquid extinguisher, and this one is for a dry chemical. The liquid extinguisher has a small strainer in the pickup tube, and also, considering the body of water can type of extinguishers such as this are cut with a male thread, that we have an appropriate connector at the yoke. And here is our pickup tube assembly for our dry chemical extinguisher. You can see that it has no strainer and it's cut at a 45-degree bevel, and that dry chemical extinguishers are cut for a cylinder body that has a female thread. I made mention of the labeling system before, and as you can see here we have our usage instructions, and it's both in English and Spanish, and this is typical for the North American market. You can see here that we have our pictograms that we discussed before. On this side here, you can see that we have ABC, which gives us another indication of its intended use. And on this side here, you have your maintenance instructions, recharging instructions, and what the extinguisher contains. On this side here, we have the date of manufacture of the extinguisher. We have the contents of the extinguisher here. And then if we look up here, we can see that we have a listing here of a classification. Extinguisher classification is basically a system that tells us what kind of capability we could anticipate from our fire extinguisher. For someone who's using the extinguisher in a commercial environment or is required to have an extinguisher, it becomes very important because you have to have so many extinguishers of a certain type within so many feet of one another. Now we looked at our 5-pound dry chemical extinguisher there, and we saw that its rating was 3A 40B-C. Now a 1A extinguisher is the equivalent firefighting capability of 1 1/4 gallons of water. A rating of 1B indicates that the fire extinguisher has the extinguishing potential to extinguish 1 square foot of a flammable liquid fire. So knowing what we know now about that, we can look at those numbers and see that the extinguishment potential theoretically is equivalent to 3 3/4 gallons of water, is capable of extinguishing a 40 square foot flammable liquid fire, and the agent employed is safe for use on Class C fires. Here are a few more informational items you'll find in regards to fire extinguishers. You'll find these plastic collars, and you'll typically find these around the neck of the extinguisher. And what this indicates is the last time this extinguisher has been disassembled for the purposes of service or inspection. A couple other markings that you may encounter are your sticker that indicates its 6-year service and one that indicates your hydrostatic test. They'll each be punched appropriately and dated with a punch, and then you'll see the hydrostatic test pressure indicated on this decal. Here are a couple of other decals for us to look at. This one here indicates that our expellant is nitrogen, and down here is our hazardous materials information system in regards to our agent. Which brings us to our inspection tag, and this is merely an annual record that's affixed to the fire extinguisher. Whenever a professional company takes care of the extinguisher, the name of the company would be indicated here, the type of agent the extinguisher is charged with here, the service performed, the extinguisher was just serviced in April of 2021. On the back side of the tag, you have information you can put on here if you have an in-house inspection policy and the date and who was inspected by, etc., etc. We'll talk about some typical extinguishing agents you may encounter in portable fire extinguishers. A water can, 2.5 gallon pressurized water extinguisher with either the water delivered as a stream or as a mist. A dry chemical extinguisher, which is certainly the most popular type of extinguisher that you're going to encounter, and that's typically using an ABC agent, which the main ingredient is ammonium phosphate. A foam extinguisher, you've got these little pressurized extinguishers now that are disposable that you can get at home improvement stores, and those deliver a foam. You also have the ability to add like a Class A foam concentrate to your water can, and in that regard it's working more as a wetting agent in reducing the surface tension of the water. You may encounter a Class B foam extinguisher, and these are typically water mixed with either a concentrate of AFFF or alcohol resistant AFFF. And these will be labeled as foam extinguishers. The dispensing nozzle will look unique, and that's designed to entrain air to allow it to form a rudimentary foam blanket. You may encounter a modern clean agent extinguisher that is employing a pressurized halocarbon that rapidly evaporates, and these are sold under many different names, but a couple of the most popular ones are Amerex's Halotron and Ansel's Clean Guard. Moving along to Class B, dry chemical again. Your ABC dry chem is fine, but we also see we have a BC dry chem, which is sodium bicarbonate. And also you'll see a purple K dry chemical extinguisher, which is common in aviation. A foam extinguisher is also a typical extinguishing agent for Class B fires. Now, your little disposable fire extinguishers you find online and at home improvement stores and stuff are suitable for Class B fires. And commonly you'll end up seeing one of your, like a water can that's set up for Class B foam or AFFF concentrate, and these will have that air aspirating nozzle. An alcohol resistant AFFF extinguisher is also available. It's important to consider that when you're utilizing a foam extinguisher and fighting a flammable liquid fire to where there's depth, is that you are attempting to generate a cohesive foam blanket to smother the fire and to suppress the vapors. Discharging your stream beyond the fire and allowing it to bank off of an object and slide back over top of the substance that's involved in combustion, rather than trying to directly spray on top of it, which can cause agitation of the foam blanket you're generating and also cause the fire to spread if you're not careful. Another typical extinguishing agent is the use of CO2, which is essentially a pressurized extinguisher that would discharge carbon dioxide, and those typically have that large cone at the discharge into the extinguisher. And a clean agent extinguisher can be utilized for Class B fires. CO2 and a clean agent extinguisher are definitely the cleanest agents to utilize to effect fire extinguishment, and that's why they're selected for places like telecom facilities and data centers and things of that nature. However, considering that the clean agent and CO2 extinguishers, you're working with a liquid discharge of a rapidly evaporating agent, they work better indoors than they do outdoors, so keep that in mind. Class C fires are fires involving energized electrical equipment. It may not just be the electrical equipment that's involved in fire. You could have a Class A fire in proximity to a high voltage piece of equipment, and until you can neutralize the power to that high voltage piece of equipment or control utilities to the structure, an electrical hazard is present. And a Class C extinguisher is something that the agents are non-conductive. Now, in fighting a fire with an energized piece of electrical equipment, the important thing is to be able to secure power to that item. And the employment of a Class C fire extinguisher to kind of keep the fire in check until either yourself or someone else can secure power to that equipment is a good idea. Typical Class C extinguishing agents are your dry chemical, CO2, and clean agent extinguishers. And now we add another one, the water mist extinguisher, that's using deionized water as an extinguishing agent. The deionized water is selected because it's demineralized water, and the water's conductivity is dictated by the amount of minerals in it. So in using a deionized water delivered in a mist, Class D fires are combustible metal fires, and these are typically extinguished with a dry powder extinguisher. This is in contrast to a dry chemical extinguisher, which is what we've discussed up to this point for Class A, B, and C fires. Now, a few of the variety of agents that are considered dry powder agents are sodium chloride, copper, and graphite. The types of agent and the method of application vary for whichever material is involved in fire. Class K fires are those organic oils and fats that you'll see in a commercial kitchen environment, and the extinguishers that are utilized for that use what's known as a wet chemical. Wet chemical extinguishers are also usable on Class A fires. The active ingredient that seems to be the most popular is potassium acetate. The wet chemical agent is deployed as a mist, and this mist, once it comes into contact with the substances that are involved in fire, creates a foam blanket, and this foam blanket smothers and cools the fire. Inspecting and maintaining your portable fire extinguishers is extremely important. You can either do this yourself, or if you're required to have an extinguisher, most of the time you're going to end up having a professional company come out and maintain your fleet of fire extinguishers. But these are some fundamentals to follow if you're self-inspecting your own equipment. First of all, you want to ensure that your safety pin is present and that that pin is secured to the extinguisher. It is not a good idea to lift the extinguisher off of however you have it attached to the wall when you don't have this kind of safety present, because it's very easy to inadvertently discharge the contents of the extinguisher, which is completely undesirable. Next, you want to check the location of the extinguisher. You want it to be accessible and visible, and also the correct type of extinguisher for the hazard of the occupancy. Next, the state of charge. Most of the time people are just going to look at their pressure gauge here and make sure the pressure gauge is in the correct range. There's also, on most extinguishers, they have a fill weight and a weight of the extinguisher, and you can actually place this on a scale and get some idea if the extinguisher has the amount of agent inside of its body that's correct for the extinguisher. Next, you want to check your nozzle for obstructions. It's not uncommon for insects to make their home in a fire extinguisher nozzle in an outdoor mounted portable fire extinguisher. And then also you want to check the condition of your hose, the crimp shells, and also make sure that this is tight in the valve of the extinguisher. The condition of the shell or body of the extinguisher, this one here has been mounted outdoors, so you can see your labeling is kind of faded, and there's a small amount of corrosion present at the bottom of the shell, but other than that it's completely serviceable. You want to clean the extinguisher with just a damp cloth to get dust and debris off of it, and especially if it's hiding all the labeling or any other markings on the fire extinguisher. Next, dates and documentation. You can check the date of manufacture of your extinguisher. You can check the hydrostatic test date here. You have your inspection tag here present, and you also have where the extinguisher has been disassembled and has its ring on there that we discussed earlier. Now that we've discussed portable fire extinguishers in excruciating detail, we can talk a bit about the use of these portable fire extinguishers. And on the whiteboard here, we have some very simple instructions on the use of a portable fire extinguisher. First of all, your personal safety comes first. It's up to you to gauge the capability of the equipment you're going to employ to mitigate the situation. If you feel like it's placing you in an unsafe situation and it's untenable, you need to withdraw. Next, position yourself within effective range. We talked in detail about the effective range of different types of agents and different types of portable fire extinguishers. Also, on modern fire extinguishers, they tell you the effective range of said fire extinguisher on that instruction label. Next, protect your point of egress. It's very important not to get tunnel vision and place yourself in a situation you can't get out of. So always protect your point of egress. Now, taking all that into consideration, pull your pin on your fire extinguisher, aim the nozzle, squeeze the dispensing levers, and then sweep the agent side to side over the material on fire. Again, knowing what type of agent you're employing is going to dictate how you're going to sweep from side to side. With a dry chemical type of extinguisher, you basically want to sweep the flames off and cover the burning material with dry chemical agent. With a water type of extinguisher, you want to apply the agent directly towards the burning material in order to effect extinguishment. When you're dealing with a foam extinguisher, you're trying to generate that foam blanket on a flammable liquids fire. Pull, aim, squeeze, sweep. Let's talk briefly about cleaning up the area after we've discharged a dry chemical fire extinguisher. Let's start by reviewing some of the properties of ABC Dry Chem, which is most likely to be the agent that you're going to encounter in the discharge of a dry chemical fire extinguisher. The physical characteristics of it are it's a very fine powder and it gets all over everything. Typically it's like a very, very light yellow or an off-white in color. This agent is mildly acidic, meaning that items that are subject to corrosion may corrode upon prolonged contact with the agent. Typically this is something that you're going to see when the agent has started to draw moisture from the atmosphere. ABC Dry Chem is hydrophoric, meaning that it has an affinity for drawing this moisture from the atmosphere. This agent tends to cake up when exposed to small amounts of moisture. Now, this is a consideration inside of a structure where it's undesirable to deliver a lot of water to effect cleanup. Now, in an engine compartment fire or a fire in a boat or something like that, or some kind of a compartment that you can flow a lot of water in to effect cleanup, that certainly is effective. The dry chemical agent, when exposed to material that is of a temperature greater than 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which is something you're going to encounter during a fire, it tends to crust up, it tends to melt, and that is part of its firefighting capability. So you may end up having to use physical means to remove that crust layer from the material that was involved in the fire. The particle size of ABC dry chemical agent is approximately 20 microns, and this is a consideration when you're utilizing a vacuum cleaner to remove dry agent. If you had one that had a HEPA filter in the vacuum cleaner, that would certainly be advisable. So in our scenario here, you've had a small fire, you use the extinguisher to effect extinguishment, the fire is out. Cleanup should begin immediately after you've determined the fire is out. If you haven't set it up already, you should set up some kind of a negative pressure ventilation system that's going to exhaust to the outside of the structure. After establishing this ventilation, start removing all of your items from the affected area. Once you've removed all these items, preferably outdoors, you can brush away the agent. You could scrape the agent off if it's something that's on something that's metal that's held temperature. And if you have an air compressor, you can certainly blow the agent off. And then and only then, after you've removed the bulk of the dry chemical agent, you can use a mild soap and water solution and then dry these articles afterwards. Now that you've got your individual items taken care of, remove your pieces of furniture and go ahead and clean up the pieces of furniture the same way. Now that the individual items and furnishings are out of the way and we can see everything, we can start our spring cleaning. Start by dusting all of your shelves and other horizontal surfaces. And then once that's done, if you have tile or hardwood floors, sweep up and use a dustpan to remove the dry chemical powder from the structure. And if you choose to use a vacuum cleaner, again, because of the particle size, choose a HEPA filter. If you made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching. I tried to shove as much information as I can into a 20-minute video, and this one went a little over 20 minutes long, so thank you very much for your attention. I feel like fire protection in general as a topic is an underrepresented topic in the preparedness community, and I happen to know something about it, so I wanted to go ahead and share what I knew with you to give you food for thought. Yeah, it's incredibly easy to make a video and talk about something you can buy on Amazon and just make money for marketing's sake, whereas trying to relate the content and trying to give you the information you need to make your own decisions on what's best for you is quite a bit more difficult. I hope this helps. This is Brett from Survivalcomms. Till next time.